Hello, this is the second video of the examination of average age methods. The first video being the Alfred Premier, and now we are going on to the Bastien Piano Basics method. Now, there's several similarities between the Bastien and the Alfred that I want to point out to begin with. One of which is they both go to 4 levels, and they all have similar core attributes in terms of supplements and how their books are laid out. Now, there's the lesson book for Bastien, much like Alfred. There's a technic or technique book, there's a performance book, and there's a theory book which starts at level 1. So the foundations are very similar that way, in which they reinforce these ideas from different perspectives and give the student an outlet of different ways to explore and to learn. Now, another similarity between Bastien and Alfred that I find striking is that one of the very first pages, again, much like Alfred, sitting at the piano, hand position, and finger numbers. It's really, in a way, somewhat identical in the layout, other than, of course, the wording is different and the illustrations are different. And they even have practice directions on how to move your fingers based on finger numbers to get the student acquainted with what finger goes where to facilitate learning as they begin to play on the piano. So this is very similar. Something that begins to change, though, although not quite yet, is that they do introduce the groups of black keys and patterns. And now Alfred also did this as well. But Bastien is considered more of a gradual, more of a gradual multi-key approach, in which case this is very based in 5-finger patterns, as we'll see in just a moment. But looking at these, I'll come closer just to make sure. It's separated by the bar line, just like Alfred, and they really feel the rhythm and the direction of keys based on these black groups. So it's very similar. One difference is that Bastien introduces a quarter and the half at the same time, whereas Alfred introduced the quarter first and stayed that way for quite some time. Much like Alfred, it stays off of the staff for quite a while, until it finally does get to the staff. They introduce space and line, and the interesting thing is that this is a gradual multi-key, but they introduce middle C. Now, it is a 5-finger pattern that they introduce it as, but it's nevertheless on C, and much of this first book stays on C, interestingly enough, which could be a weakness just because they never really get the variety of the sound that's different when you change keys. Very 5-finger pattern based, very chordal. This could be an issue for younger kids who can't reach that well to play all 3 down at the same time, so that's one thing to consider about Bastien. It's illustrated much like Alfred as well. They do touch on intervals, and that's something that wasn't mentioned in the Alfred video as well. Alfred also introduces intervals as well, so it's well-rounded that way in both aspects. It does finally move to this G position, but very 5-finger pattern based, as you can see here. Now, supplement to this book are technic or technique, much like the Alfred, and what they do, the first book you'll find is very rooted in the 5-finger position on C. It supplements whatever is being taught or going on in the lesson book. There is this back part for a little creativity of blank space. I think that's up to the teacher's discretion, though, how much they use. Now, for performance, much like Alfred, they do have a performance book, although with Bastien, it doesn't look very different than the lesson book in a lot of ways. And I think Alfred may be stronger in that respect, that they have very specific directions on which to focus in terms of musicality. So the musicality reinforcement may be a bit stronger with Alfred, depending on how you use these methods. Now, the theory is something worth noticing as it starts in level 1. There's a lot of games and activities, a lot of key signatures to recognize. There's crosswords. It could be very interesting. And in this respect, it starts to introduce more keys as well. And that supplements what's going on in level 1 of the method book, or the lesson book. Now, lesson 2, or book 2, begins to look at scales, and inversions, very five-finger based. Book 3, you start to get the arpeggios, and for example, in the lesson book of level 3, it incorporates both the arpeggio and a different five-finger position in A minor. And now here's an inversion in the left hand, also incorporated. That 5-6-5 of A minor. So it's incorporating everything, so it's a reinforcement and it's putting everything together. Although one thing to notice about this is that by the time you get to the last piece in the final level of Book 4, it sounds like this. Sorry? Now this is much more musical, but nevertheless, if you look at the pattern on the page, it still looks very based in a five-finger position. So this could be a downside in the fact that the hand position is possibly not as flexible as it should be. There's not a lot of leaps. There's not a lot of interval leaps this way. So that could be a downside of this approach to the method. But nevertheless, there's a lot of strong things here and a lot of similarities despite the differences to Alfred. One last thing to mention is that Bastien consolidates all of these four things: the performance, the method book, the theory, and the technic book, all in one. And that's the Bastien's New Tradition all in one. It's everything in one level. So you've got the primer, level 1, level 2, all in one. So that's Bastien, and next we will be looking at Francis Clark's music tree.